Uh, there was a little girl that I was seeing quite often over there that her father was in the Air Force. And
The quiet halls of Graceland carried memories, but nothing could prepare Elvis's family for the secret locked inside his bedroom safe. For years it stood untouched, a silent guard to the king's private world. When the heavy door finally opened, dust rose like whispers of the past and their hearts raced. What lay hidden inside was not gold, not jewels, but something far more powerful, something that left them frozen in silence. They stared, unable to believe their eyes as the truth of Elvis's most guarded secret came to life. What they found would change everything forever. The silent safe of Graceland. Graceland stood tall beneath the soft southern sky, its white pillars glowing faintly under the warm light of day. The gates, adorned with music notes and memories, carried the hum of visitors who came from every corner of the world. They came to walk through the famous halls, to stand where a legend once stood. But beyond the velvet ropes, beyond the sound of cameras and laughter, there was a silence that no footsteps could break. The family always felt it, a silence that belonged not to the house, but to the man whose voice had shaken the earth. Lisa Marie stood quietly in the hallway, her gaze fixed on the staircase that led to her father's private quarters. She had walked through these halls many times before, but today carried a weight unlike any other. Today she was not simply a daughter remembering the past. Today she was ready to face it. Behind her, close family members gathered, their voices hushed, their faces caught between fear and longing. They too felt the weight of the moment, but none more than Lisa. She breathed in deeply, whispered to herself, "It's time," and stepped forward. The group followed her slowly. Every creak of the staircase seemed louder than before, every step a reminder of the sacred space they were about to enter. At the top stood the door to Elvis's bedroom. It had been closed for so many years, guarded like a relic of the past. Lisa's hand hovered over the doorknob. Her heart pounded as though it would break through her chest. Then, with one steady push, the door opened. The room breathed with stillness. The bed was neatly made, as though waiting for the weight of the man who would never return. A piano sat by the window, its keys untouched, longing for fingers that once brought it to life. In the corner rested his favorite chair, the fabric worn thin by countless nights of quiet reflection. Every object spoke of him, every corner whispered his presence. The air was heavy with memories, so thick that for a moment no one dared to speak. Lisa took a small step forward, her eyes traveling across the room. "It's like he never left," she said softly, her voice breaking. As the others stood in silence, her gaze caught something unusual. Behind the dresser against the far wall, there was a faint outline, a square mark that did not belong to the smooth wood. Curiosity pulled her closer. She leaned in and discovered what had been hidden all these years: a safe. Its surface was cold and untouched, sealed since the day her father passed. The atmosphere changed. The silence deepened, pressing down on every chest in the room. It was as though the walls themselves knew of the secret and hesitated to share it. One of the family members whispered, "Do we want to open it? What if there are things inside we shouldn't see?" Another voice, heavier with caution, followed. "What if it only brings pain? Maybe it was locked for a reason." Lisa did not speak at first. She kept her eyes on the safe, her thoughts racing. All her life she had wondered about the mysteries her father left behind. What secrets had he chosen to lock away? What message had he hidden from the world? Finally, she turned to the others, her eyes glistening. If he wanted it hidden forever, he would have destroyed it. He left it here. Maybe he wanted us to find it when we were ready. I believe this is the time. Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. No one argued. Deep down, each of them felt the same pull, the same truth, that the safe was not meant to stay locked forever. Together they pushed the dresser aside. The wood scraped against the floor, the sound echoing through the silent bedroom like thunder. Breathless, they stood before the safe, its black frame dark and unyielding. For a long moment, no one touched it. They circled it, pale faces marked with both anticipation and dread. It seemed alive, like a guardian of secrets, daring them to reach forward. Lisa placed her hand gently on its cold surface. "This is part of him," she whispered, "and I need to know what he wanted us to see." The others nodded slowly, though fear lingered in their eyes. The safe sat still, its heavy door sealed, holding on to whatever truth it had guarded for decades. The room grew quieter still, as if the world itself paused to listen. Every sound sharpened, the faint rustle of clothing, the shallow breaths, the creak of the floor beneath their feet. Beyond the walls of Graceland, life carried on. Cars moved down the road, the wind swayed the trees, but inside that room, time had stopped. They spoke of calling someone to open it, but no one moved yet. The safe demanded their silence, demanded their courage. They all stood around it, bound together by a secret they had not yet uncovered. Lisa remained still, her hand resting on the steel surface. Her heart beat like a drum, her eyes fixed on the safe as though it might whisper to her. This was more than just metal and locks. This was her father's final secret, the last piece of him he had chosen to guard. The day the safe spoke. The morning sun drifted through the wide windows of Graceland, painting the old walls with a soft, golden glow. The house, always alive with whispers of music and memory, seemed heavier that day, as if it knew a truth was about to be revealed. The air carried both silence and weight, the kind that pressed against the skin and made every breath feel measured. In the heart of the house, Elvis Presley's bedroom stood still. His daughter, Lisa Marie, was there with her family close to her. Their eyes, though restless, never left the dark figure at the center of the room, the safe. Heavy, cold, and unyielding, it sat in silence, holding inside it whatever secrets Elvis had chosen to lock away. The decision had already been made. The safe would be opened. When the call was placed, footsteps echoed steadily through the halls, each one louder than the last. A locksmith, familiar with the house but rarely called into this particular room, entered with careful composure. His hands were steady, his eyes calm, but even he seemed aware that this was no ordinary task. His gaze shifted from the safe to the waiting faces. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm, almost as though he hoped they might change their minds. Lisa Marie nodded slowly, her lips tight, her voice soft yet unshaken. "Yes, it has to be opened." The man lowered himself before the safe, laying out his tools with deliberate care. The family gathered closer, though none dared to speak. The first strike of metal against steel echoed like a bell through the quiet halls. The sound was sharp, almost violent, as if tearing at the silence that Graceland had held for so many years. The family flinched together, their hearts quickening. The house seemed to listen, each creak of the floorboards a response to the sound of intrusion. With each scrape of the locksmith's tools, the air thickened. The safe resisted, refusing to surrender. The lock was stubborn, as though it had been designed not only to protect but to preserve something sacred. Lisa Marie's gaze never left it. Her heart ached as memories pressed against her, her father's final days, his heavy footsteps pacing through these very halls. She saw him slipping into this room alone, closing the door behind him for hours at a time. When he emerged, his face was pale, his eyes far away, like a man carrying a burden no one else could touch. Her aunt's voice broke softly into the air, barely more than a whisper. "He was always hiding something, even from us." The locksmith continued, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The safe groaned and held its ground, each click of the tumblers faint, uncooperative. It was as though the steel box itself wanted to keep its master's silence. The family stood frozen in the thick tension. No one dared to move, as if their very presence might disturb the work or shatter the fragile thread of patience holding them there. One of them spoke, the words trembling but true. "Do you remember how he would shut himself away for hours? He wouldn't let anyone in, not even those closest to him. Sometimes it felt like his secrets were the only thing he trusted." Lisa Marie closed her eyes. She had heard those whispers from the staff, the aides who had watched her father retreat into solitude. The world had known his smile, his voice, his energy. But the man himself, the private heart of him, was guarded fiercely, shared with no one. And now, perhaps, those pieces rested inside the steel box before them. The locksmith adjusted his grip, his tools biting once more. A harsh strike rang out, and the safe groaned as if in protest. The room seemed to tremble with the sound, as though even the house disapproved of this invasion. Time slowed. The clock on the wall ticked endlessly, each second heavier than the last. The family shifted nervously, hands clenched together, their breaths shallow. Then at last it came, the sound they had been waiting for. A sharp crack split through the air. The lock loosened, the stubborn door shuddered, and slowly, with a long creak that felt like a sigh, the safe opened. A rush of air escaped, stale and thick, carrying with it the scent of leather, paper, and time itself. Dust swirled in the beam of sunlight that spilled across the floor, drifting like tiny ghosts, freed at last. The family leaned forward, hearts pounding, breaths caught in their throats. But what they saw inside was nothing like what they had imagined. There were no stacks of shining bills, no glittering jewels, no gold that spoke of fame or fortune. Instead, the shelves were lined with sealed envelopes, journals stacked in careful order, and a small box wrapped tightly in a cloth faded by years. Confusion struck harder than surprise. The silence grew thicker, wrapping around them until the weight was almost unbearable. Why would he lock these away? One voice whispered, thin and fragile. Lisa Marie's lips trembled as she answered, her words breaking into the quiet. These were his truths. Her voice lingered in the air. The safe, once a symbol of wealth and secrecy, had given them something far heavier. It had not revealed treasure for the world's eyes, but fragments of a man's soul carefully hidden from it. Lisa Marie stepped closer. Her hands shook as she reached inside. Her fingers brushed against the corner of the first envelope. The paper was fragile, its edges yellowed with time, as though it had been waiting for this very moment. The room itself seemed to hold its breath with her. Her hand closed around the envelope. She lifted it gently, her pulse racing, her chest rising and falling too quickly. The world outside disappeared, leaving only the weight of the paper in her hands. "I think he wanted me to see this," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. The others stood still, their eyes locked on her trembling hands. No one spoke, no one moved. The safe had been opened, and in its silence it had finally spoken too. The secrets of a father hidden for years had found their way back to his daughter. The safe that held his heart. The room inside Graceland felt heavy, as if the air itself carried secrets. Dust drifted in golden beams of sunlight, floating like tiny ghosts, while silence pressed against the walls. It was not an ordinary silence. It was the kind that held breath, the kind that knew something sacred was about to be revealed. In the center of the room stood Lisa Marie, her hands trembling as she held a sealed envelope. It was thin, fragile, yet it seemed to weigh more than she could bear. Her father's safe had been opened, its breath spilling out after years of being locked away, and now this envelope was in her hands. Everyone around her stood still, waiting, their eyes fixed on her, afraid to move or even to breathe too loud. Lisa pressed her lips together, gathering strength. Her fingers touched the seal, and with a small sound, sharp, soft, almost painful, it broke. Inside lay paper that carried her father's handwriting, bold and flowing, the kind that looked alive. For years his voice had been silent, but now it returned in ink. Her voice was unsteady when she began to read, but it was clear enough to fill the room. "The world calls me the king, but sometimes I feel like the loneliest man alive. When the stage is empty and the lights go out, I sit alone and wonder if anyone truly sees me. The cheers fade, but the silence stays." Her voice cracked and her hands lowered for a moment. She pressed the paper against her chest, her eyes shining with tears. Someone whispered faintly, "He was hurting more than we ever knew." But Lisa could not stop. She lifted the letter again. The words carried pictures of dark nights when the music ended and the house grew cold. He wrote of walking alone through his halls, searching for something unnamed. He dreamed of freedom, not the freedom of fame, but the simple freedom to walk the streets without eyes following him, to laugh without cameras chasing, to be a man without a crown. "I gave my voice to the world," the letter said, "but in return I lost my peace. Every face around me wants something. Trust is a treasure I cannot afford. My heart aches in silence because no one truly knows me. The family lowered their eyes. Their hands tightened together as though holding one another against the sorrow spilling from the page. These were not the words of a king adored by millions. These were the cries of a man hidden inside that crown, crushed beneath its weight. Lisa unfolded another sheet. His pain deepened with every word. "I am trapped," he confessed. "I cannot escape the machine that runs my life. Every step, every song, every word is chosen for me. Sometimes I wonder if I belong to myself at all." The paper shook in Lisa's hands. The room grew heavy again. They could feel the bars of his prison, the prison of fame, where the chains were not iron but applause, where the crown gleamed but cut deep into the skin. Then came a letter of regret. His writing shifted, restless, as though the words had cost him too much to write. "I wish I could go back," he wrote, "to moments when I chose wrong, to words I should have spoken but never did. My mistakes follow me like shadows. I see them in the eyes of those I love. If I could undo them, I would, but the past does not let go." Tears slid silently down cheeks. They thought of his broken relationships, the cracks carved by fame, the weight of regret he had carried in silence while the world cheered his name. Beside the letters lay journals, their leather covers worn and soft. Lisa opened one carefully, her breath catching as she turned the fragile pages. Inside were songs never sung, lyrics filled with sorrow and longing, not written for the world but for himself. Words poured across the paper like confessions, aching with dreams of escape. She read softly, her eyes tracing the lines. He dreamed of a life far from lights, in a small hidden home where music lived only for joy, not for stages. He dreamed of a name that meant nothing but family, not headlines. The family leaned closer, their hearts aching with each word. For the first time, they were meeting him not as the king, but as the man who had longed for peace. Next to the journals was a box wrapped in worn cloth. Lisa's hands unfolded it with care. Photographs spilled into her palms, gasps filled the room. These were not the pictures the world had seen. These were private, tender, sacred. Priscilla's smile in a moment of quiet love. A baby Lisa Marie in her father's arms, her face pressed to his chest, his eyes filled with a softness few had ever seen. Family moments frozen in secret frames, guarded away from the hungry eyes of the world. Tears filled Lisa's eyes as she held them. These were not treasures for magazines. These were treasures for his heart. Then, nestled among the photographs, was a ring. It caught the sunlight, shining softly. It was heavy, beautiful, filled with meaning. On the inside was an inscription, delicate but deep, "For the one I trust with my soul." The family stared in silence. It was a gift he had created but never given. It had remained hidden, waiting, a promise that stayed unfinished. Lisa's hands closed around it, her tears falling onto the band. Her voice was a whisper, broken yet full of love. He kept his heart here. And at that moment they understood. The safe had not hidden riches, jewels, or gold. It had hidden something greater, his pain, his regrets, his hidden dreams, his love. Tears fell freely, not only for what they had found, but for the man they were only just beginning to know. For the world, Elvis had been a legend, a king. But in those letters, in those photographs, in those journals, he was a man who had carried sorrow, who had longed for peace, who had dreamed of love. The letter in the safe. The bedroom felt like a held breath. Sunlight moved across the floor in slow, warm steps and settled on things that had not been touched for years. Papers lay like fallen leaves on the bed. Photographs stared up with faces frozen in lighter times. A ring caught the light and threw it back in a soft, steady glint. Open journals showed ink that had slept for a long time, pages full of nights and small confessions. Everyone stood very still, as if sound might wake something sleeping in the house. Lisa Marie did not move at first. She watched the papers, the photographs, the way dust made soft halos in the light. Her family made small, careful sounds, a chair set down, a footstep on carpet, but mostly there was a quiet that felt deep as the room itself. Then she looked down. In the shaded corner of the safe, tucked where only the smallest things might hide, A white envelope waited. It was different from the others. It had not been opened to pieces. Its edges were sharp. The seal held. Across the front, written in a hand she had known since she could read, was one name: Lisa Marie. Air left her like a small sigh. Her fingers slowed. The world narrowed until the envelope was the only thing to see. Someone's whisper slid through the hush. "It's for you." The words were not loud, but they were enough. Faces turned. All those at the doorway leaned forward without stepping, as if to catch the moment before it broke. She moved toward the safe with steps that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her hands trembled in a way that was not shame or weakness, but the weight of something both heavy and precious. She reached in and took the envelope. It was small, almost ordinary, yet the weight of it carried more than paper. It carried a life. She sat at the bed's edge and held it there, as if the chair could hold some of the truth too. For a long time she only looked at the writing, at the loop of letters she had traced with crayon and a pencil as a child. Then she said, hardly louder than a thought, "I don't know if I can read this." Her voice sounded thin and honest, full of fear and hope braided together. A hand, warm and steady, landed on her shoulder. "He wanted you to," someone said. The touch was small, the words small, but they held as support does. She closed her eyes, breathed in, and let the moment lean into her. Fingers found the seal and broke it. The paper side open. Ink lay on the paper like someone speaking close to the ear. When she read, her voice started low and sure, then washed into cracked edges of sound as memory and meaning folded into one another. "My dearest Lisa, if you are holding this, it means time has given you the strength I always prayed you would find." The voice on the page was quiet in the room, but the sentences rose as if he stood before her. "I want to tell you something that I could never say out loud. The world owned me, my music, my name, my face, but you, my little girl, you were always mine. Don't ever let the world you the way it owned me. Live free, live in love, find joy in the small things. That is where peace hides." The lines seemed simple, but they held the bend of years. Tears came slow at first, then steady. She pressed the paper to her lips and began again. The words were whiskey warm and ache soft. They were the kind of words that could not be hurried. "The shadow I carried was heavy. I walked under it every day, and sometimes it felt larger than me." Her voice trembled now. The room listened as if it too must learn. "I don't want that shadow to follow you. Promise me you will not carry it. Promise me you will be more than the daughter of the man the world loved. Be Lisa. Be yourself. Be the light I always saw in you." Each sentence laid another stone on a long, gentle path back toward what had been hidden. Everyone around her seemed to shrink into the sound of the writing. Their breaths found the same slow rhythm, like the house holding the same secret. She turned another page with fingers that no longer shook so much. "My greatest fear has always been that you would remember me only as the man the world loved, the figure on stage, the name people called loudly, but I was more than that. I was your daddy." The word landed like fresh earth, simple and true. "Loving you, Lisa Marie, was the truest thing I ever did. If you read this, it means you are ready to see me not as a crown, but as a man. A man who made mistakes, who carried regrets, but who loved you more than all of that." Her tears blurred the ink, but did not stop her. She read on because the reading felt like a quiet answer to a voice she had missed. The house around them seemed to breathe with a different kind of light, as though the walls themselves had been waiting for these lines. "I cannot know where life will take you," the letter finished, each word steady and spare. "But if you hold this, remember this. You are strong enough to carry truth, to forgive my flaws, and to know the love I held for you. That love was real. That love is yours forever. Daddy." When she finished, the small sound she made was a sob that held the whole room. It was not a sudden collapse, but the soft, true opening of a thing kept closed too long. She folded the paper to her chest as if to hold the words inside where the heart could keep them. Around her, arms came in. People leaned together like a circle of small lights, each one offering warmth. No phrases could reach the shape of what they felt. Only the closeness of bodies and the shared silence made the moment whole. They read it again, each in their minds, tasting the simple honesty of the phrases. The man whose voice had filled arenas and radios was, in a line of clean ink, only a man who loved his daughter. The legend that had wrapped itself around his life loosened at the edges and fell away like an old coat. In its place stood a father, with all the small human things that bring both joy and sorrow. The safe, once the keeper of secrets, seemed smaller now. Its metal had not changed, but its meaning had. It had not held treasures of gold or fame so much as a last, honest word. The room felt lighter. The light through the window seemed brighter, as if it had been waiting to find what was hidden and then could shine. They rose slowly from the bed, carrying the hush with them. They moved as if the floor remembered their footsteps and asked them to be gentle. The letter stayed with Lisa Marie like a precious thing against her heart. They walked toward the door together, a quiet company of people bound by something new and old at the same time. In the hallway, she paused and looked back. The bedroom looked different through her eyes. Not a shrine to a life of applause, but a room that had kept a father's last words safe. The open safe stood as proof that what mattered most sometimes came in the smallest packages. She turned her face to the light and with a voice that was steady and soft, promised, "I'll carry your truth, Daddy. I'll never let them forget the man behind the music." That promise was for more than memory. It was a promise to let what she had learned shape the way she lived and loved. She stepped forward. The letter pressed close and left the room where the past had been quiet and the truth had finally spoken. Outside, the house received them like a patient friend. The air felt clean, as if the story the safe had held could now move freely through the rooms and down the long halls. The photographs on the bed caught the light and seemed to smile in their small way. The journals lay open and waiting, their pages no longer the only place where pain and hope had been kept. They moved on together, sure of nothing but connected by what had come from a small sealed envelope. The letter did not change the past, but it changed the shape of what would come next. It wrapped memory in a softness that made space for forgiveness and for knowing. It was not a cure or an answer to all things. It was a clear human voice at the end of a long road, and that voice was enough.